goes wrong is all my fault. And then there's some directors in the room who can turn your attention to them. You know, we have a record number here. This group started with 4 of us in 2010. And we have 298 people on the mailing list. And we have approximately 160 of you here. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is give yourselves a round of applause. I'm going to only ask for one standing ovation, and that is for the senior member of our group. He knows who he is, and he's 93, and he is absolutely precious and priceless to this industry. From Channel 2, please give him a big round of applause to Saul Halpert. Pete Noyes worked in the same building, CBS Columbia Square. Many of us found a home at Columbia Square for a good number of years with George Nicholaw. We were downstairs in television, George was upstairs in the radio, and I'd like to turn the mic over now to Pete Noyes to give us a couple of reflections and bring up a couple of speakers to remember George Nicholaw. And if you don't mind, Pete will do this seated, but he is right here. Pete Noyes.
Just as a diversion, I'd like to think back to 1963 was most of you were born. And the day the dam broke, I had a reporter standing on top of that dam, the Baldwin Hills Dam, with a camera crew. He had cursed me out for sitting in the story, and I'm sure he's still cursing me today. Saul Halpert, you remain majestic. The only problem was we didn't have a live feed. We had a dead camera, so by the time they were rescued, everybody else was on the air. But those were the days. Now, George Nicholaw, he was at CBS, KNXT, KNX, and he came there in 1967. And we had a great general manager at Channel 2, Bob Wood. Two of the brightest men in broadcasting were running these two stations. And a little bit about George, he came from Salinas. Probably the most important person to come out of Salinas since John Steinbeck. But George was a terrific person, and he's credited with starting All News Radio. I thought one of his best acts was to create Weather and Traffic Together. When the geniuses who ran the big news fired Bill Keane and Gil Stratton, George immediately picked up both of them, and he started Keane on the Traffic and Weather Together, and it was really became one of the big hits of KNX Radio. George had a good idea about what people listen to, what stories they like to hear, what was news in Los Angeles. And I want to come introduce one of the people who work for him right now. She's in the here today. Yvonne Belser, would you come up, say hello to everybody?
People from NBC may not know that I worked for KNX Radio for 7 years prior to coming to NBC. And George was the general manager of the station. And my memories of him, particularly centered around election night, was on election night that we covered in KNX, that he was not there in the newsroom giving us support, showing this great deal, that he was there for us.
To talk a little bit about George's accomplishments, he was on many organizations, the California Broadcasters Association. He was the chairman of the State Racing Board, California Horse Racing Board, the Los Angeles Energy Commission, and he also served on the boards of the National Association of Broadcasters, the Hollywood Sign Trust, and the Johnson Cancer Center at UCLA. 180 golden mics. The Peabody Award, the highest award in television. the Alfred DuPont Award. Just an amazing record of success in broadcast news. He also was named one of the outstanding general managers in radio by Don Barrett. Do you know who Don Barrett is? He's the Bible of radio in Los Angeles. He said he was the greatest general manager who ever held a job in Los Angeles. And Barbara Tall is going to talk a little bit about this. Barbara, you want to come forth?
By the time I got to KNX in 1979, I had been through about 4 or 5 general managers, and I kind of noticed that there was a gamut that GMs ran. There was the one that just couldn't keep his fingers out of the newsroom. He had to tell us how to do our jobs. Then there were the other ones that's like you practically didn't even know that they existed. And I have to honestly say that George, I couldn't even call him George. He was such a classy guy. He was always Mr. Nicola. Not that he said, you have to call me Mr. Nicola, but he just kind of had that aura of respect around him. And I appreciated the fact that he hired good people and he let them do their job. The only other thing that drove me nuts about George is his love of horse racing, because that meant we had to do a lot of horse racing results. And we got a lot of angry horse racing fans when they couldn't get their results. But I remember him as being a very kind, respectful person who allowed us to be what we were. And there was just like a veneer of class that he kind of laid over the station. And I don't think you can ask for much more than that. Someone who allowed us to be what we were. I appreciate that.
Bob just gave me 30 seconds. I never told a story in less than 2 minutes in my life. But to wrap it up here, George was a legend, a broadcasting legend. He was an influential member of the community, a pretty good tennis player, and a devoted husband. And I think, as general managers go, he was one of the best I've ever seen. Thank you very much, George. You'll be in our prayers.
Pete Norris, thank you very much. In 1980 and 81, I had the great pleasure of producing Channel 2's 11 o'clock news, and the co-anchors were Jess Marlow and Connie Chung. I hardly need to tell you that Jess was a pleasure and a pro, and about the best single broadcaster I've ever worked with. And I miss him terribly, and I hope he would be proud of what we're about to do. There's a woman in this room who is luckier than me, because she got to work with him a lot more than I did. And together, they were an outstanding broadcast co-anchor team. And that's Jess Marlow, along with Kelly Lang. And to give us a rundown and show you some video, much of which I don't think you've ever seen, I want to present to you none other than the Queen herself, Kelly Lang.
You guys look so good. It's so wonderful to see all of you here. And I walked in, I've got my jeans on, of course, and I thought, oh my God, even Noyce has real pants on. Charles got real pants on. And then I saw Joel Tater. And Tater's in jeans that looks like he's been wearing them since the Roosevelt administration. Stand up, Joel. Show him how he got. Anyway, since Charles thanked the rest of the world, I need to thank him. Because when I came to him with my wish to honor Jess, I told him I had a restaurant, I had a caterer, I would pay for it, but he had the mailing list, and I asked him if he would help. Help? He moved mountains. Mountains. He worked on this from day one, from that day 2 months ago to this, well, this minute. Still working. Still working. He never stopped. And Bob Tarlow is the person who made this happen. We are at, and we are over capacity. Don't tell City Fire, please, all you newsies here. And there are still people outside who are banging on the gates trying to get in, but we couldn't do it. We couldn't get any more people in here without going to jail. So we cut it off. But we are the lucky ones, you and I and all of us here, because all of us here now can honor and say farewell to a dear friend and a true giant in our business, Jess Marlow. Of course, we said goodbye to Jess many, many times. As you know, he retired, what, 5 or 6 times? And every time we had a big party for him, right? And every time, he kept coming back. Because he kept getting, people kept calling him back and offering him, giving him an offer he couldn't refuse. So he was back on, back on, back off, back on, retiring, goodbye. It's well to see you, we love you, we love you. And the next 2 weeks later, he was back on. But this is our last farewell to Jess Marlow, okay? This is going to be our last farewell. Well, until we all see him again at the big party, and you know we will. We'll all see him again, where everybody will be able to get in the gates, I'm sure. Even Noise. Oh my God. No, you know, if Noise was working today the way he did at Channel, when he would grab a reporter and shove him against the wall when he walked in the door and say, "You fucker, you buried the lead." He would be in jail, you know, he would be electrocuted. But anyway, that's our Pete. Right now, we're going to show you Jess's last farewell show on this planet, his retirement from KCET time and Life and Times. And this video, produced and reported by Phil Bruce at KCET. This was the last night that Val Zavala and Jess co-anchored on Channel 28. Val, you did this, you found this. It was Jess's final co-anchor job, and it was Val. And there you are, sweetheart. And you know what? She hasn't even seen this in years and years and years, so she's going to get in for a treat too. So here is just an inkling. Now, before we run this tape, though, I got to tell you this. I've been on the phone day in and day out with Phyllis Marlow, Jess's longtime wife. And there are a lot of people who wanted to speak here today, and a lot of people have asked me, and I've had to say, you know what? We've got 200 people in this room, and 190 of them aren't going to have time to speak because we're in and out of here in 45 minutes, right, Bob? So, but I called a lot of people and wanted to get a message from them. You know, would you have a message that you want to say at our tribute to Jess Marlow? And one of them, of course, was Phyllis. And I said, Phyllis, just email me your message. And she said, Kelly, I don't need to write it down. And you don't need to write it down either. My message is 4 words. I had the best. And that's for sure, huh? So here's just an inkling of what Phyllis Marlow had for 69 years with Jess Marlow.
You may have heard and you may have cheered. It's my final broadcast, and I hope I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm glad you are, and it's our special send-off for a man who has changed the face of Los Angeles television. In case you didn't know, Jess and his wife Phyllis are leaving Los Angeles this summer and moving to Santa Fe. It goes without saying how much we'll miss them, but we can't let them go without recalling how the Marlows got here nearly 40 years ago. Tonight, Philip Bruce takes us back to the early days of Jess.
As a kid, he had what people used to call all-American good looks. But back then, if you'd gone in search of Jess Marlow, folks in Salem, Illinois might have said, "You mean Myram?" That's what Mom and Dad named him. He was one of 9 kids in the Marlow family, followed in his father's footsteps, and got a job with a railroad as a telegraph operator. But soon enough, the telegraph gave way to television, and Myram was now history. The fresh new talent in Rock Island, Illinois would go by his middle name, Jess. TV wasn't necessarily the obvious choice. Jess took a $10 pay cut when he left the railroad to become a broadcaster. Somehow, though, it all worked out.
Good evening. In this evening's news, Navy Secretary...
By the early 60s, Jess had made his way to California as an anchor and news director at a San Jose TV station. There he is, the guy with the flat top, interviewing President John F. Kennedy. And then, finally, the big break. A chance to come to Los Angeles to work for NBC News and Channel 4.
When Jess first started, he was the Orange County correspondent for Channel 4. And he also did the 11 o'clock news on Sunday night. But in 1968, Channel 4 decided they would be the first people in the country to do a 2-hour newscast. Unheard of, that you would have 2 hours of news. And they picked Jess to start it off at 5 o'clock.
In those days, a legendary Rayford Johnson, Channel 4's sportscaster, was a big star. Jess Marlow was just starting to make a name for himself. But Joel Tater, Channel 4's sharp young director, knew Jess was something special, a real newsman.
Jess, of course, was the news director of his station in San Jose before he came to LA, and he was very, very aware of the important stories and what should lead a newscast, for example. He always huddled with the producer of that broadcast to make sure that the stories were, the important ones got to the top.
It was a time when Channel 4 was filled with young journalists destined for big things. The front line consisted of Tom Brokaw, Tom Snyder, and Jess, plus a distinguished Washington correspondent turned anchor named Bob Abernathy. Joel Tater was part of that crowd and won a slew of Emmys for local and network productions. Now, nearly 40 years later, he says it's no surprise why Jess Marlow is still such a class act.
When you're a director, you want someone out there on camera when something goes wrong who can deal with it. Jess was number one at that. When something would go wrong, as it invariably did every show, I don't think I ever did a show without a mistake in it. He was right there. He would just say, we'll have that later, and he would move on.
He's seen us through the best of times and the worst of times, and for Jess, one of the absolute worst was the loss of a close friend, pilot Francis Gary Powers, who crashed in the Channel 4 helicopter.
Francis Gary Powers died doing what he liked to do. But that's small comfort for us. We have no less grief for George Spears, the engineer cameraman. Frank was our friend. Damn it, he was the public figure.
But there were plenty of light moments, especially the times Jess filled in as an anchor on the Today Show and stumbled on a new way to deliver the news.
Albert, good morning, Jess.
Good morning, Jim. Thank you. Growing indications this morning that the Camp David Middle East Summit has reached the make or break stage. You can't do it when you're sitting on it. I learned that from Gene Shalit.
He is unflappable, but not necessarily goof-proof.
Running a private school like a public one. Let's reverse that, please. Running a public school like a private one.
That's right.
If you want the goods on the real Jess Marlow, a good place to start is with Robert Andrade, our stage director on Life and Times, and the one who's supposed to keep Jess on the right path.
I know secrets, so keep the money coming. Appreciate it.
Over his long career, Jess has been a globetrotter. He went to China with Bob Hope, and he went to Vietnam when few other Americans had been there since the war.
The Mekong River and its hundreds of miles of tributaries make this one of the richest rice-growing regions in all of Indochina.
Jess was one of the few Americans ever to peek inside the remains of Russia's Chernobyl nuclear plant after it melted down. And he appeared on Russian television in a rare exchange of journalists aimed at building bridges between two old adversaries.
Журналист американской компании NBC Jess Marlow.
Another veteran Los Angeles broadcaster says Jess always set the pace for the competition and for his own newsroom.
Very nice man, impeccable integrity, first-rate journalist. Never had an ego thing, if you will, which is such a common problem in this business.
As TV people will tell you, not all of your favorites are as nice in real life as they are on the screen. Jess is, and Ken Donnelly will attest to that. 32 years ago, he was a 7th grader from Los Alamitos. His journalism class went to NBC on a field trip to see how a newscast worked. And that's when he met his favorite anchor, Jess Marlow.
So he didn't have to come over there and say hello to us, and he went out of his way to do so. Nobody else, the days we were there, did. And that just really stuck out because we were very intimidated, very excited, but very intimidated. And he really made us feel like he was glad we were there.
He owes some of his successes to the many women in his life. You've seen most of them and know their names. But you may not know the one who's had the greatest influence on Jess. She's a high school sweetheart who was Jess's date at the Valentine dance. And as you might have guessed, this cute couple grew up, got married, and lived happily ever after. All of us who know and love Jess feel the same about Phyllis, and we know without her, all the great things in his life might have never happened.
Long ago and far away.
Retirement is just the latest chapter of the Jess Marlow story. It's one that's still being written. And so far, it's a happy story that we never get tired of hearing.
That dream is here beside me.
All very sweet, but like being stripped naked.
Well, I'd just like to thank you for a chance to actually drink during the show. Because this is a nice tradition. We'll start, and I'd like to toast you.
This apple cider almost tastes like the real thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, you have classed up this joint more than we ever had a right to expect or deserve, and we all love you.
It's been a wonderful experience. This last 2.5 years have been great, mostly because of the association. Great people to work with. Val couldn't be a better co-anchor, that's for sure. Even though she runs the place, she's the boss.
That's true.
But I'm used to that at home, so it's okay.
That's true. Well, we thank you so much. We wish you well. It's a bittersweet day for us because we'd love to have you, but we know that it's going to be a great future.
We're looking forward to a new adventure, and you've given us a terrific send-off. I appreciate this.
Thank you, my friend.
You bet.